It was our 10th anniversary. 10 years. I bought her the diamond earrings she'd been eyeing for months. Made reservations at that fancy Italian place she loved. The one with the white tablecloths and the opera music playing just a little too loud. Everything was supposed to be perfect. I even wore the suit she liked. The charcoal grey one, even though it was a bit snug now. I had lost a little weight recently, but not enough to notice really. I just felt good, hopeful. It was our anniversary, a milestone. We sat across from each other, the soft glow of the table lamp reflecting in her eyes. Sarah. She looked beautiful, like always. Her dark hair was styled perfectly, and she wore the dress I'd picked out for her last Christmas. I remember thinking how lucky I was, how we had built something together, how we had weathered storms and come out stronger. Or so I thought. The appetizer, a delicate carpaccio, arrived. We made small talk, the kind of comfortable chatter that comes from knowing someone for a decade. We talked about work, about her upcoming trip for a conference, about the new show everyone was binging. It felt normal, it felt us. Then the main course came. Linguine with clams for her, a huge steak for me. I was halfway through cutting my steak. A perfect medium rare when she paused, fork hovering over her pasta. Her expression shifted. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was more like a calm, settled disappointment. A look I had seen before, but usually directed at a slow waiter or a bad driver. Never at me, not like this. You know, she started, her voice quiet, almost thoughtful. I sometimes wonder what could have been. I put my knife down. My stomach did a little flip. This wasn't anniversary talk. What do you mean, honey? I asked, trying to keep my voice light, to steer the conversation back to the happy part. Maybe she was talking about a different vacation we could have taken, a different car we could have bought. She took a sip of her wine. Red, a rich Chianti. Just everything our life, my life. She set the glass down a little too hard. I had so many dreams, Alex. So many plans. My throat tightened. And we're living them, aren't we? We have a good house, steady jobs, we travel. I gestured around the elegant restaurant, trying to show her how far we had come. This place wasn't cheap. This was a place for successful people, for people who had made it. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Good house? It's just a house, Alex. Steady jobs? You are still at the same company, doing the same thing you were doing 5 years ago. 10 years ago, really. You haven't moved up. Not really. Not like you said you would. The air in the restaurant suddenly felt thin. The soft music seemed to sharpen. The clatter of silverware on plates became deafening. I've gotten promotions, Sarah. My salary has increased. I'm doing well. My voice was a little shaky now. I could feel a hot flush creeping up my neck. Her eyes, those beautiful dark eyes, narrowed slightly. Doing well compared to what, Alex? Compared to nothing? Compared to your friends from college who are all VPs now? Compared to the goals you set for yourself? You talk about potential, but you never reach it. You just coast. And then it came. The words that would forever mark the end of everything. They landed on the table between us, heavy and cold, scattering the romantic atmosphere like shards of broken glass. You are a failure, Alex, she said. No shouting, no anger in her voice, just a flat, undeniable statement of fact. You are a failure, and I am tired of waiting for you to be something more. The words hit me like a physical blow. My breath caught in my chest. Failure. Me. On our 10th anniversary. Over a plate of cold steak and lukewarm wine. For a long moment, I just stared at her. Her face was impassive, no regret. No sudden wave of empathy for the man she had just utterly demolished. She genuinely believed it. She had said it out loud. A strange calm washed over me. It was not the peace of acceptance, but the quiet stillness of a battlefield after the final shot has been fired. The war was over, and she had just declared me the loser. But a loser doesn't just lie down. Not always. Sometimes a loser, pushed to the very edge, finds something new within himself, a cold, hard resolve. I felt it then, a clarity I hadn't possessed in years. All the little slights, the subtle put-downs, the constant dissatisfaction that had been a low hum in the background of our marriage, suddenly coalesced into a blinding light. This wasn't just a harsh comment. This was the summation of how she truly saw me. And if she saw me as a failure, if she truly believed that after all these years, then what was left? What was there to save? A failure, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper, testing the words on my tongue. They tasted bitter. Is that what you think? She just looked at me, a shrug of her shoulders as if to say, it's obvious, isn't it? And in that moment I knew exactly what I had to do. The decision was made. Not with a shout or a dramatic outburst, but with a quiet, certain finality that settled deep into my bones. The divorce papers. For dessert, it was the only fitting end to this particular anniversary dinner. The thought was so clear, so precise, it almost felt like a whispered instruction from some hidden part of myself. I picked up my knife and fork again, not to eat, but to signify the end of the meal, the end of everything. I was done. The words echoed in my head as I sat there, trying to process the magnitude of what she had just said. You are a failure. Not a criticism of something I did, but an indictment of who I was. It cut deeper than any argument we had ever had. And trust me, we'd had our share. But this felt different. This felt like the end of a long, slow burn. To understand why that moment hit so hard, you have to go back, way back, to the beginning. Sarah and I met in college. She was bright, ambitious, always the smartest person in the room. I was good. Good grades, good at sports, good with people. We were a classic pairing. The driven, brilliant woman and the charming, supportive man. That's how it felt, anyway. At first, she had this incredible energy. She'd talk for hours about her dreams of changing the world, of climbing the corporate ladder, of making a real impact. And I listened, fascinated. I admired her so much. My own ambitions were simpler. I wanted a comfortable life, a family, a job I enjoyed. I wanted to be happy. I thought she would make me happy. And for a while she did. Our early days were electric. We'd stay up all night talking, planning our future. We'd laugh until our sides hurt. She saw something in me then, or at least she said she did. She'd tell me I was capable of anything, that I had a quiet strength, a natural leadership quality. She was my biggest cheerleader, or so it seemed. The first subtle shifts began after we graduated. We both got entry-level jobs. Mine was in marketing, a good starting point. Hers was in a competitive consulting firm. She worked long hours, constantly pushed herself. I admired her drive. I supported her. I cooked dinner when she got home late, listened to her vent about demanding clients, celebrated her small victories. But her victories started to feel less like ours and more like hers alone. And my progress, while steady, seemed to pale in comparison to her meteoric rise. She got promoted quickly. She moved into management. She started making significantly more money than I did. And that's when the comments started. Not direct at first, more like observations. You know, Alex, if you just put in a few more hours, you could really stand out at work. You have the potential. My colleagues are all talking about their stock options. Are you sure your company's benefits package is competitive? It's great that you like your job, but sometimes I think you are a little too comfortable. Don't you want to challenge yourself more? At first, I brushed them off. She was just trying to help, right? She wanted the best for both of us. I genuinely believed that. I took her advice sometimes, pushed harder, tried to impress her. But it never seemed to be enough. The criticisms became more frequent, more pointed. My hobbies, which used to be charming, became distractions. My desire for work-life balance was lack of ambition. My contentment was complacency. We bought a house. It was a big step. We pooled our savings, took out a mortgage. I thought it would solidify us, give us a shared foundation. Instead, it became another battleground. The house wasn't big enough. It wasn't in the right neighborhood. It didn't appreciate in value fast enough. It was always something. I remember one time, we were at a party with her work friends. They were all talking about their latest achievements, their grand plans. When someone asked me what I did, I gave my usual modest answer. Later in the car, Sarah snapped, "Why do you always downplay yourself, Alex? Don't you see how that makes you look? Like you are not serious about your career, like you are not serious about anything." I felt a knot in my stomach. It wasn't about downplaying myself. It was about not wanting to brag. It was about being humble. But she saw it as a weakness. The core of our dynamic shifted. I was no longer her equal partner, but rather a project. Something to be improved, to be pushed, to be molded into her ideal. And her ideal was someone who mirrored her own relentless drive, her own definition of success. And I wasn't that person. I never would be. I tried to talk to her about it. "Sarah, I feel like you are constantly judging me, like I am not good enough." Her response was always the same. "I am not judging you, Alex. I am just trying to motivate you. I see your potential. I just want you to reach it. Is that so wrong? Don't you want to be better?" And I did. I wanted to be better, but better in her eyes always meant more like her. More focused on career advancement, more money, more status, less focused on the simple joys of life, on the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, on friendships, on just being. Over the years, the love, the admiration began to chip away, replaced by a growing resentment on my part and a growing disappointment on hers. I started to pull back emotionally. It was easier than facing her constant scrutiny. She probably saw that as another failure, another sign of my complacency. By the time our 10th anniversary rolled around, we were living separate lives under the same roof. We shared a history, a house, and a thin veneer of civility. But the true connection, the deep understanding and acceptance that forms the bedrock of a marriage, was long gone. It had been eroded by 1,000 small cuts, by her constant pushing, her unyielding expectation that I be someone I was not, and her consistent message that who I was simply not enough. And that's why, when she finally looked me in the eye and called me a failure, it wasn't a sudden, shocking revelation. It was the brutal, unvarnished truth of how she had seen me for years. It was the culmination of a decade of subtle and not so subtle criticisms. It was the final, definitive statement of our broken reality, and it set me free. Not free in a joyous way, not yet, but free to finally admit that the dream she had for me was a nightmare for myself. The failure comment wasn't a single isolated bomb dropped in a moment of anger. It was the biggest explosion, yes, but it was just the latest in a long drawn-out war of attrition. Sarah had been chipping away at my self-worth for years, piece by painful piece. Looking back, I can pinpoint so many moments. Little cuts that bled slowly, leading up to that final gaping wound. There was the time I got a promotion. It was a good one, a significant step up in responsibility and pay. I came home that day, excited, practically bouncing. I had planned a special dinner, bought a bottle of champagne. I told her the news, expecting celebration. Her response: "That's nice, Alex. It's about time. Though you know Mark from my office just got made senior director, and he's 2 years younger than you." The air went out of the room. The champagne tasted flat. My excitement evaporated. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Then there was the car incident. My old car was reliable, but admittedly not flashy. Sarah's car was a sleek, expensive European model. One day her car was in the shop, and she had to drive mine. When she got home, she tossed the keys on the counter with a sigh. "I swear, Alex, driving that thing is embarrassing. My clients saw me pull up in it. I just hope they didn't think I was your assistant." She laughed. But it wasn't a kind laugh. It was the kind of laugh that cut you down to size. My car, my choice, suddenly became a reflection of my supposed inadequacy. An embarrassment to her carefully constructed image. She often compared me to other people, not just her colleagues, but mutual friends, my own family members, even fictional characters from movies. "Why can't you be more decisive like David?" she'd ask, referring to a friend who had a habit of making impulsive, often questionable decisions. Or, "You should really learn to negotiate harder, like that guy on Shark Tank." Every comparison was a subtle indictment, a suggestion that I was falling short. Our arguments often revolved around money, even though we were financially comfortable. Her definition of comfortable was constantly escalating. We needed a bigger house, a more exclusive vacation, designer clothes, the latest gadgets. And when I suggested we save more, or be a little more mindful of our spending, she'd say, "That's why you are not where you should be, Alex. You think small. You always settle for less." It wasn't about our finances. It was about her perception of my drive, or lack thereof. She also had a way of twisting my words, of making my opinions seem less valid. If I voiced a concern about her demanding work schedule, she'd say, "Oh, so now you are telling me I shouldn't work hard. You want me to be like you. Just coasting along?" It was a masterclass in gaslighting. My genuine concern for her well-being was reframed as an attack on her ambition, a projection of my own perceived failures onto her. I tried for a long time to be what she wanted. I worked longer hours. I read self-help books. I even tried to adopt some of her more aggressive communication styles, which felt completely unnatural too. I thought that if I could just prove myself, if I could just meet her ever-moving goalposts, she would finally be happy with me. She would finally see my worth. But the more I tried, the more I lost myself. My own values, my own sense of who I was, became diluted. I'd spend longer hours at the office, not because I was passionate about the work, but because it was a refuge from her constant judgment. My friendships suffered because I was too exhausted, too drained to maintain them properly. My self-confidence plummeted. I started to believe her. Maybe I was a failure. Maybe I wasn't ambitious enough. Maybe I was just not good enough. My attempts to cope were mostly internal. I'd retreat. I'd spend hours in my head dissecting our conversations, trying to figure out where I went wrong. I'd make excuses for her behavior. She's just stressed. She just wants the best for us. She loves me. She just has a tough way of showing it. These excuses were flimsy bandages on gaping wounds. Just a few months before the anniversary dinner, there was another pivotal moment. My beloved grandmother passed away. She was the one person who had always unconditionally believed in me, who had nurtured my strengths and accepted my flaws. I was heartbroken. Sarah's reaction. She was sympathetic, but within days she was urging me to get back to normal. When I mentioned taking a few extra days off work to deal with the grief, she said, "Alex, you just got back from vacation. Your boss isn't going to look kindly on this. You need to focus on your career, especially now." My grief was an inconvenience, another sign of my weakness, my inability to push through. That was a particularly harsh moment. So, when she delivered that final devastating line at our anniversary dinner, it wasn't a surprise. It was the culmination. It was the explicit declaration of everything she had implicitly told me for years. It was the final nail in the coffin of my self-esteem if I had let it be. But instead, something shifted. The immense pain triggered a different reaction. Instead of collapsing under the weight of her judgment, I felt a strange sense of clarity. If this was how she truly saw me after 10 years, then there was nothing left. No more trying, no more pretending, no more hoping she would change or that I could become enough for her. The breaking point wasn't just my spirit breaking, it was my patience, my capacity for self-delusion, finally shattering. And in the shards, I saw a path forward, a path without her, a path where I could finally breathe. The ride home from the restaurant was silent. A heavy, suffocating silence that was far worse than any shouting match. Sarah was on her phone, typing furiously, probably texting her friends about some work crisis or planning her next ambitious move. She didn't look at me once. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur, feeling a strange mix of emptiness and a simmering, cold anger. When we got to the house, I walked straight to the office. Our office, the room we had set up together, filled with books and a shared desk. I sat down at my computer, not knowing what I was doing, just needing to be somewhere else, anywhere but near her. She walked past the doorway a few minutes later, heading to our bedroom. She didn't say goodnight. She didn't say anything. Just a faint sniff, as if she was annoyed that I wasn't in there with her. I stayed up late, staring at the screen, the words, "You are a failure," looping in my mind like a broken record. But with each repetition, the sting lessened, replaced by that icy resolve that had settled over me at the restaurant. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to defend myself. I wasn't going to try and explain how much her words hurt, or how unfair they were. What was the point? She had said it. She believed it. And that was all I needed to know. The next morning, I woke up before her. The house felt different. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of a decade of disappointment. I made myself coffee, the usual ritual, but today it felt hollow. I went through the motions of getting ready for work, my mind a whirlwind of practicalities and emotions. I knew what I had to do. The idea had formed fully in my mind the previous night. A perfectly clear solution. It felt drastic, yes, but also utterly necessary. It was the only logical step. If she saw me as a failure, if our marriage was a constant battle of her expectations against my reality, then it was time to dissolve it. At work, I pretended everything was normal. I answered emails, attended meetings, but my focus was elsewhere. During my lunch break, I closed my office door pulled out my phone and typed "divorce lawyer consultation" into the search bar. I clicked on a few links, read reviews, and picked one that seemed reputable, one that offered a free initial consultation. I called and booked an appointment for that same afternoon, making up an excuse about a dentist appointment to my boss. Walking into that lawyer's office felt surreal. It was a sleek, modern building, glass and steel, nothing like the cozy home I had spent 10 years trying to build. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Miss Davies, listened patiently as I explained. In a calm, almost detached voice, what had happened the night before. I omitted the raw emotion, focusing only on the facts. The 10 years of marriage, the growing dissatisfaction, the final insult. When I finished, she nodded. "So, you are looking for an uncontested divorce if possible." "I am looking for a divorce," I clarified, "as quickly and cleanly as possible. And yes, if she agrees, uncontested would be ideal. But I am prepared for it not to be." She laid out the process, explained the legal terms, the financial implications, the steps involved. It was all so formal, so clinical. It felt like I was discussing a business transaction, not the dissolution of my entire adult life. But that clinical detachment was exactly what I needed. Kept me from breaking down, from collapsing under the weight of what I was doing. I listened intently, asking precise questions about timelines and necessary documents. I specifically asked about the initial filing, what it entailed. She explained that the first step was simply serving the papers, officially notifying the other party of the intent to divorce. "Can I serve them myself?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow slightly. "Can, yes. Though it's often better handled by a third party, for legal reasons and to avoid escalating emotions." "I understand," I said, "but I prefer to do it myself." A faint smile touched her lips. She seemed to understand. "All right, we'll prepare the initial petition. It'll take a day or two to draft. You can pick them up, or we can mail them." "I'll pick them up," I said, "as soon as they're ready." The next 2 days were a blur. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner for myself while Sarah ate separately or worked late. We barely spoke. Tension in the house was a physical thing, a thick, suffocating blanket. I could feel her resentment, her frustration. But she probably just attributed it to my continued failure to engage, my continued coasting. She had no idea what was brewing. On Friday, Miss Davies called. The papers were ready. I left work early, again with a flimsy excuse, and drove straight to her office. She handed me a thick manila envelope. Inside were several copies of the divorce petition. My name, Sarah's name, the date of our marriage, and the simple, stark declaration of intent to dissolve it. It was real. It was happening. I drove home slowly, the envelope heavy on the passenger seat. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. There was no turning back now. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't a bluff. This was the end. I thought about how I would do it. Just lay them on the table, send them by mail? Number that wasn't enough, not after what she had said. She had served me a crushing insult at our anniversary dinner. I would serve her something equally unforgettable. Something that would make her realize the true cost of her word. The idea for dessert had been a fleeting thought that night, born of anger and hurt. But now it felt like the only appropriate, poetic justice. It felt right. I would wait. I would find the perfect moment. And then I would serve her divorce papers for dessert. The preparation was complete. The papers were in hand. All that was left was the execution. A cold, quiet, necessary execution of the end of us. The plan was set. The papers were in my briefcase, carefully placed between 2 mundane work folders. I carried them with me everywhere. A quiet, heavy secret. I was waiting for the right moment, the perfect confluence of circumstances that would allow me to deliver this final, undeniable statement. It had to be just right. It had to be public enough to make an impact, but private enough that it wasn't a total spectacle. I thought about doing it at home, but that felt too quiet, too contained. She could just walk away, storm off, deny it. No, it needed a witness. Not a stranger necessarily, but someone who would see the full weight of the situation. Someone who knew us. The opportunity presented itself a few days later. Sarah's work had an annual formal dinner, a fancy affair that she always insisted we attend. It was a big networking event for her, and she always wanted me there in my charcoal gray suit, smiling, playing the supportive husband. This year it felt different. I was no longer her support. I was her executioner. I dressed meticulously that evening. The same suit from our anniversary, but this time it felt less like a costume for a hopeful celebration and more like armor for a final battle. I checked my briefcase one last time. The papers were there. We arrived at the upscale hotel ballroom. It was packed with well-dressed people, the air buzzing with polite chatter and the clinking of glasses. Sarah was in her element, gliding through the crowd, making small talk, introducing me to her colleagues with a practiced smile. "This is my husband, Alex," she'd say, her voice bright, but always with a subtle undertone, a faint inflection that seemed to say, "He's fine, but not as successful as me." I just smiled, shook hands, and played my part. I was an actor in her play, and this was my final scene. We found our table. It was a large round table, shared with two of her senior colleagues and their spouses. Perfect. A small audience, but not so large as to cause a massive scene. Just enough to ensure she couldn't simply dismiss it. Dinner progressed. Appetizers, then the main course. Sarah was animated, talking about her latest project, her recent success, her plans for the coming year. She spoke with confidence and authority, commanding the attention of the table. I mostly listened, offering a polite nod or a brief comment when appropriate. My mind was elsewhere, focused on the task at hand. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. Then the waitstaff began clearing the main course plates. This was it, the moment. "And for dessert tonight," the waiter announced, walking around the table, "we have a delicious chocolate lava cake with raspberry coulis, or a classic New York cheesecake." Sarah, still mid-sentence about a new client acquisition, smiled at the waiter. "Oh, the chocolate lava cake for me, please. And for Alex?" She looked at me, a fleeting glance, then turned back to her colleague. "He'll have the same." I raised my hand, stopping the waiter. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the chatter at our table. Everyone paused, looking at me. Sarah turned, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. She hated when I interrupted her. "I won't be having chocolate lava cake," I said, looking directly at Sarah. My gaze was steady, unwavering. "I've brought my own dessert." A hush fell over our table. Sarah's colleagues exchanged confused glances. Sarah herself just stared at me, a puzzled frown on her face. "What are you talking about, Alex?" she asked, her voice tight with annoyance. I reached down, unzipped my briefcase, and pulled out the manila envelope. It was thick, substantial. I placed it on the pristine white tablecloth, directly between us. The sound of it hitting the linen was surprisingly loud in the sudden silence. Then, slowly, deliberately, I pulled out the top document, the official petition for divorce. I slid it across the table until it was directly in front of her. The words "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage" were clearly visible at the top. Sarah's eyes widened. She looked at the document, then at me, then back at the document. Her face went utterly blank, a mask of pure shock. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her pale. "What is this?" she whispered. The confidence she had displayed all evening utterly gone. Her voice was thin, reedy. I leaned forward slightly, my voice low but clear, ensuring everyone at our table could hear every word. "This, Sarah," I said, my voice devoid of emotion, "is for you. You called me a failure at our anniversary dinner, so I decided it was time to serve you divorce papers for dessert." The silence around our table was deafening. The other couple sat frozen, forks poised, eyes wide with stunned disbelief. Sarah's senior colleagues looked like they wanted to disappear under the table. Sarah, however, finally found her voice. It was a strangled, furious gasp. "Are you insane, Alex? What the hell are you doing?" She tried to push the papers away, but they remained stubbornly on the table. "I am ending it, Sarah," I replied, still calm, still steady. "I am ending the constant criticism, the endless judgment, the feeling that nothing I ever do will be good enough for you. You want success. This is my success, my freedom." Her eyes blazed with a mixture of fury and humiliation. Her face, which had been pale, now flushed a mottled red. "You can't do this, not here, not like this." "Oh, but I can," I said, standing up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You set the stage, Sarah. You chose the words. I am just closing the curtain." I looked around at the stunned faces at our table. "Please excuse us," I said, my voice polite but firm. "It appears our dinner is over." I turned, walked away from the table, from the gasping silence, from the woman who had just realized the true depth of my resolve. I left her sitting there, surrounded by her high-achieving colleagues, with her chocolate lava cake and a stack of divorce papers for dessert. The air outside the ballroom felt incredibly fresh, crisp, and clean. It was the first breath of true freedom I had taken in a very long time. Walking out of that ballroom, leaving Sarah stunned at the table with her colleagues and the divorce papers, felt like shedding 1,000 pounds. The immediate aftermath was a strange mix of exhilaration and bone-deep weariness. My legs felt shaky, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I had done it. The definitive public declaration. I didn't go straight home. I couldn't. I knew she'd be there, probably furious, possibly distraught, definitely demanding answers. I wasn't ready for that confrontation. I just needed to breathe. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city lights a blur. I ended up at a small, quiet bar I used to frequent in college. A place with dark wood and soft jazz. I ordered a beer, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to just exist, without the weight of Sarah's expectations. My phone started buzzing a few minutes later. Her name flashed across the screen. I silenced it. Then it was her sister, then a mutual friend. I ignored them all. I wasn't going to engage in the immediate fallout. I had made my statement. Now it was time for the practical steps. I stayed at the bar for a couple of hours just thinking. About the past, about the future. The initial burst of satisfaction began to fade, replaced by a dull ache. This was real. My marriage was over. 10 years, it was sad, even if it was necessary. I allowed myself to feel that sadness, to mourn the loss of what I had once hoped for. The dream of a life with someone who genuinely loved and valued me. When I finally got back to the house, it was past midnight. The lights were off. I walked in quietly, heart pounding. The house felt like a tomb. I went straight to the spare bedroom, the one we used for guests, and quietly closed the door. I pulled a blanket from the closet and lay on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house, Every rustle made me tense. The next morning, the silence was still deafening. Sarah was probably still asleep, or maybe she was just avoiding me. I got up, showered, and started packing a bag. I grabbed essentials, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, my most important documents. I was moving out, at least temporarily. I couldn't stay in that house. Not with her, not now. As I was zipping up my bag, I heard a sound behind me. Sarah was standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "What are you doing, Alex?" Her voice was low, shaky. The fury from the night before was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. "I am leaving," I said, not looking at her directly. "I can't stay here, not after last night, not after the last 10 years. "You can't just leave," she cried, her voice rising. Her face was a mess of emotions. But even then, I saw the self-pity, the focus on her own humiliation, not on the pain she had inflicted. "You humiliated me for years, Sarah. You called me a failure. You chipped away at me until there was nothing left. I just did it in one clear, public statement." She started to cry then, real tears. But they didn't move me, not anymore. I had seen too many of them used as weapons or shields over the years. "I didn't mean it, Alex. I was angry. You know how I get." "No, you meant it," I said, my voice flat. "You've meant it for a long time. This is just the first time you said it out loud, without a filter. And I heard you. Loud and clear." I picked up my bag. "My lawyer will be in touch. Everything will go through the proper channels. For now, I am staying with my brother." She took a step towards me, her hand outstretched. "Please, Alex, let's talk about this. We can fix this. We're married. 10 years. We can't just throw it all away." "You threw it away, Sarah," I said, walking past her towards the front door. "A long time ago. I am just picking up the pieces now." I walked out of the house, leaving her standing in the hall. The silence that followed me out the door was different from the one in the car. This one was liberating. It was the quiet of a new beginning. My brother Mark lived across town. I called him from the car. He was shocked, of course, but understanding. He knew our marriage had been strained. He just didn't know the full extent of it. He let me crash on his couch, no questions asked. His support was a quiet comfort, a stark contrast to Sarah's judgment. The next few days were a whirlwind of practicalities. I met with Miss Davies again. We discussed finances, assets, the house. It was all so cold and formal, yet utterly necessary. She advised me not to engage with Sarah directly, to let all communication go through her. It was good advice. Sarah started calling and texting incessantly. Apologies mixed with accusations, pleas mixed with threats. I forwarded them all to Miss Davies. "She's upset, Alex," Miss Davies said calmly. "This is normal. Just remember why you did this. Stay strong," and I did. I reminded myself of that anniversary dinner, of her words, of the decade of criticism. Every time a wave of doubt or sadness washed over me, I remembered that failure comment. It was my anchor, my reason. This wasn't a rash decision. It was the inevitable outcome of a deeply unhealthy dynamic. The emotional roller coaster was intense. One moment I'd feel an incredible sense of relief, a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The next, a wave of sadness would hit, remembering shared moments, the good times that had existed, however fleetingly. It was a grief, a mourning for a future that would never be, for a person I thought I knew. But underneath it all, that cold resolve remained. I was moving forward, one painful, necessary step at a time. And the first step, leaving that house, had been the hardest and the most freeing. The days and weeks following me moving out were a relentless barrage. Sarah wasn't going to let me go easily, that much was clear. My phone, which I kept mostly on silent, vibrated constantly with her calls and texts. My inbox filled with her emails. Sometimes she called from blocked numbers just to get through. It was a full-court press, an assault on my newfound peace. Her tactics shifted almost daily. At first, it was rage. How dare you do this to me? You humiliated me. You ruined my career. My reputation is destroyed. She truly believed I had destroyed her life. Not that my actions were a response to her own. There was no acknowledgement of her part, no genuine regret for her words. It was all about her and her perceived suffering. Then came the pleas. Please, Alex, let's talk. I miss you. This is a mistake. We can fix this. Remember all the good times. Remember how much we loved each other. She would dredge up old memories, moments of genuine happiness we had shared, trying to use them as leverage, as if they could somehow erase the decade of emotional abuse. It was manipulative, but a part of me, the part that still remembered the person I fell in love with, felt a pang of sadness. I had to remind myself that those good times were often fleeting, overshadowed by her constant dissatisfaction. The gaslighting was perhaps the hardest to counter. You are overreacting, Alex. It was just a comment. People say things when they're upset. You are blowing this out of proportion. You are being dramatic. She would try to minimize her actions, to make me doubt my own perception of reality. I never meant to hurt you. You are imagining things. We've always had a strong marriage. This is just a rough patch. She even tried to rewrite history, suggesting that her constant criticism was merely constructive feedback, and that I was too sensitive. I stuck to Miss Davies' advice. All communication through her. I forwarded every text, every email. Miss Davies' responses were always calm and professional. Standard behavior, Alex. Do not engage. We will address these claims formally. Her steady guidance was a lifeline. One afternoon, I was at my brother's apartment, trying to focus on work, when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Sarah standing there looking disheveled, tear tracks on her face. She looked genuinely distraught. Alex, she choked out. Please, just talk to me. I came here to apologize. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I was stressed. I was tired. I didn't mean a word of what I said. You are not a failure. You are a wonderful man, and I love you. Please, just come home. It was a powerful performance. The tears were real. Her voice trembled with emotion. For a second, just a split second, I almost faltered. Part of me that craved peace, that wanted the easy way out, whispered, maybe she's changed. Maybe she finally gets it. But then I saw it. The subtle flicker in her eyes, the way her gaze darted to see if anyone else was around, the slight shift of her weight as if preparing for a dramatic embrace. It was an act. A desperate, calculated act. And even if it wasn't an act, even if she truly felt remorse in that moment, it didn't erase a decade of pain. One apology, however heartfelt, couldn't undo years of emotional damage. I took a deep breath. Sarah, I said, my voice steady. I heard you the other night. You said exactly what you've been implying for years. You believe I am a failure and I can't live with that anymore. This isn't about one comment. This is about everything. About how you see me and how you've made me feel. Her face twisted. The tears stopped, her eyes narrowed. So this is it? You are just throwing away everything we built for one stupid sentence? The vulnerability was gone, replaced by anger again. Fine, be a martyr, Alex. See if I care. You'll regret this. You'll see what it's like to be truly alone. I don't think so, I replied. I think I'll finally be free. She stared at me for another long moment, her chest heaving. Then she spun on her heel and stormed away. I watched her go, a profound sense of relief washing over me. I had held my ground. I had seen through the act, and it had solidified my resolve even further. I realized then that her apologies were never about genuine remorse for her actions. They were about the consequences of my actions. She wasn't sorry she had called me a failure. She was sorry that I had reacted to it by leaving. She wanted to restore the status quo, where she was the one in control, the one doing the judging, and I was the one trying to please her. Constant attempts at contact gradually subsided as she realized I wasn't going to break. Miss Davies sent her lawyers the formal response to her initial outburst, reiterating my position and the request for an uncontested divorce. The legal process was moving forward, slow but steady. This period was tough, but it was also incredibly clarifying. It allowed me to see Sarah for who she truly was, without the rose-tinted glasses of love or the desperate hope for reconciliation. She was someone who thrived on control and who could not admit fault, even when faced with the complete collapse of her world. It hurt to admit that the person I had spent 10 years with was like that, but the realization was also liberating. It cemented the fact that I had made the right decision. I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was escaping a cage, with the constant barrage of Sarah's manipulative tactics starting to wane. I finally had some space to breathe, to really start focusing on myself. Living at my brother Mark's apartment was a lifesaver. He was exactly what I needed, a calm, non-judgmental presence. He didn't pry, but he listened when I wanted to talk. He just kept things normal, which was exactly what I needed when my whole world was upside down. One evening, Mark came home with a stack of old photo albums. "Found these cleaning out the attic," he said. "Thought you might want to look at them." They were full of pictures from our childhood, our awkward teenage years, and then, eventually, photos of me and Sarah from college, from our wedding. Looking at those old pictures was a strange experience. I saw the younger me, full of hope, and the younger Sarah, so vibrant and seemingly kind. It made me sad for what we once had, or what I thought we had. But then I'd remember the failure comment, and the years of emotional erosion, and the sadness would give way to a quiet certainty that this was necessary. This was the only way forward. Mark gently pushed me to reconnect with our mutual friends. I had isolated myself so much over the years, partly because of Sarah's subtly discouraging comments about my friendships, and partly because I was just too emotionally drained to maintain them. When I finally reached out, they were incredibly supportive. They had seen what was happening even if they hadn't said anything directly. They knew Sarah could be difficult, critical. They rallied around me. Friends cooked me meals, invited me out for beers, just talked about normal things. It was a powerful reminder of what true, unconditional support felt like. It was a stark contrast to Sarah's conditional love. I also started seeing a therapist. Miss Davies had recommended it, saying it was common for people going through divorce, especially emotionally charged ones, to need an outlet. I was hesitant at first, but it turned out to be one of the best decisions I made. The therapist, a kind, understanding woman named Dr. Evans, helped me untangle the mess of emotions I was feeling. She validated my experience, helping me see that I wasn't too sensitive or overreactive. She helped me identify the patterns of emotional abuse, the gaslighting, the constant criticism that had chipped away at my self-esteem. During our sessions, I talked about the decade of feeling inadequate, of constantly trying to measure up to an impossible standard. She helped me reframe my self-worth. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's definition of success, Alex. She'd say, it's inherent. And the fact that you stood up for yourself, that you chose your well-being over a destructive dynamic, that's a huge success. Her words were like water to a parched throat. I started to believe them. I rediscovered old hobbies that I had abandoned, because Sarah thought they were a waste of time. I started playing my guitar again, something I used to love. I joined a casual basketball league. I started taking long walks in the park, just enjoying the quiet, the feeling of the sun on my face. These simple things, these moments of quiet joy, brought me more peace and fulfillment than anything Sarah had ever tried to push me towards. My parents, who lived a few states away, also reached out. They had always been wary of Sarah, sensing her controlling nature, though they never explicitly said anything. When I told them about the divorce, they were heartbroken for me, but also relieved. My mom cried, not for the end of the marriage, but for the pain I had endured. Their love was a warm, comforting blanket. We just want you to be happy, son, my dad said. Truly happy. The legal process was moving slowly, as divorce cases often do. Sarah's lawyer was trying to drag things out, questioning every detail, trying to make things difficult. Miss Davies assured me this was normal, another tactic. But because I had done my emotional work, because I had my support system, her delaying tactics felt less like personal attacks and more like annoying administrative hurdles. I wasn't reacting with anger or despair anymore. I was just focused on the end goal, official, legal freedom. This period of rebuilding wasn't easy. There were still days when the sadness would hit, when I'd question everything. But those days became fewer and further between. I was learning to trust myself again, to listen to my own needs and desires, rather than constantly trying to anticipate and appease Sarah's. I also started to understand the difference between healthy ambition and toxic perfectionism. Sarah's drive had always been about external validation, about proving herself to the world. Mine was about internal satisfaction, about finding joy in the process, not just the outcome. Our fundamental values were simply incompatible. I started taking better care of myself too, eating healthier, exercising more regularly. I felt stronger, both physically and mentally. The weight I had lost was visible now, not just on the scale but in my face. I looked less strained, more relaxed. People started telling me I looked good, that I seemed happier, and I was. The support system I built around me became my new foundation. Friends, family, a good therapist. They were the ones who truly believed in me. Not conditionally, not based on my perceived success or failure, but simply because I was me. This journey of separation, though initiated by pain, was slowly but surely leading me back to myself. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most important. I was finally starting to heal. The legal process, like a slow-moving glacier, finally began to pick up speed. After months of back and forth, of Sarah's lawyer attempting every possible delay tactic, we were scheduled for court. Not a full trial, but a series of hearings and mediations to finalize the divorce. Sarah, still clinging to the idea that she could somehow manipulate the situation, refused to settle amicably. She wanted to fight. She wanted to make it as difficult as possible for me. Miss Davies prepared me thoroughly. She's going to try to paint you in a bad light, Alex, she warned. She'll probably try to make herself out to be the victim, or portray you as lazy or unmotivated. Stick to the facts. Don't engage with her emotional theatrics. The first day in court was surreal. It was a sterile, impersonal room. Sarah was there with her lawyer, sitting rigidly across the room from me. She wouldn't look at me. Her lawyer, a stern-faced woman, launched into an immediate attack, portraying me as someone who had squandered opportunities, who had relied on Sarah's success, who was ungrateful for all she had done. It was exactly what Miss Davies had predicted, the failure narrative, but amplified and put into legal terms. I listened calm. Miss Davies in turn presented our case. She highlighted my consistent employment, my contributions to the household, the equitable division of assets. She didn't dwell on the emotional abuse, but she subtly alluded to the deteriorating emotional climate of the marriage, providing context for my decision. The crucial moment came during mediation. We were in a small conference room, just us, our lawyers, and a mediator. Sarah, looking impeccably dressed, but clearly agitated, started to tear up, describing how I had abandoned her, how she had sacrificed everything for our marriage, implying I was the one who had failed her. "I tried so hard, Alex," she sniffled, looking at me with wide, teary eyes. "I just wanted us to have the best life. I pushed you because I believed in you, and you just gave up." I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't feel anger, or sadness, or even pity. I felt nothing, just a clear, detached understanding. This was her narrative. This was how she justified her behavior. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, cutting through her performance, "you didn't push me because you believed in me. You pushed me because you needed me to be someone I am not. You called me a failure on our anniversary. Not because you were angry, but because that's how you truly see me. And that's why we're here. I can't live with someone who fundamentally believes I am a failure." Her lawyer tried to interject, but the mediator held up a hand. The raw honesty of my statement had cut through the legal jargon and the emotional manipulation. Sarah visibly flinched. The mask of the victim faltered. The conversation then shifted back to finances. This was where Sarah really showed her true colors. She tried to claim disproportionate shares of assets, arguing that her higher earning potential and past contributions entitled her to more. She fought over every single item, down to sentimental pieces of furniture. It was exhausting. But Miss Davies was a bulldog. She had meticulously catalogued every joint asset, every contribution. She had anticipated Sarah's greed. She presented irrefutable evidence, calmly debunking Sarah's claims. The house we had built together, the one I had poured so much of my own time and money into, only for her to constantly criticize it. We eventually agreed to sell it and split the proceeds, but it was a bitter pill. That house had represented a future, a home, a dream that had slowly turned into a cage. The final hearing was a formality. Sarah, defeated on most of her unreasonable demands by Miss Davies' meticulous preparation, finally agreed to the terms of the settlement. The judge's voice was monotonous as he read out the decree. "The marriage between Alex Miller and Sarah Miller is hereby dissolved." It was done, officially. The gavel fell, a small anticlimactic tap, but to me it sounded like the thunderclap of a new beginning. I looked at Sarah one last time. Her face was set, grim. She didn't look at me. She just walked out of the courtroom, her lawyer hurrying after her. There was no grand scene, no dramatic exit, just the quiet, definitive end. I felt a profound sense of relief. It wasn't triumph, not exactly. It was more like the quiet satisfaction of having survived a long, arduous journey. I had walked through fire, and I had come out on the other side, not unscathed, but whole. Miss Davies shook my hand, a genuine smile on her face. "Congratulations, Alex. It's over. You handled yourself with incredible grace and strength. I thanked her, genuinely grateful for her unwavering support. Walking out of that courthouse, the bright sunlight felt warmer, the air fresher. The weight was gone. The emotional battlefield of my marriage was finally behind me. I was divorced. I was free. And for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like a survivor. A new chapter was beginning, and it was entirely mine to write. The ink on the divorce papers was dry. The house was sold, the assets divided, and Sarah was officially out of my life. The initial weeks and months post-divorce were a period of profound adjustment, a quiet recalibration of my entire existence. It was like learning to walk again, but this time on my own 2 feet, choosing my own direction. The relief was immense, a constant underlying hum of peace. Tension that had been a permanent resident in my shoulders for years finally dissipated. I could breathe deeply without feeling a knot in my stomach. I could make decisions without anticipating Sarah's criticism. It was liberating in a way I hadn't truly imagined. I continued with therapy, because while the legal battle was over, the emotional healing was still ongoing. Dr. Evans helped me process the lingering sadness, the regrets, and even the anger. We talked about healthy boundaries, about recognizing red flags in future relationships, and most importantly, about building a strong, unshakable sense of self-worth that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. I learned that my value wasn't tied to my income, or my job title, or anyone's opinion of me. My value was inherent, simply because I existed. That was a revolutionary concept for someone who had spent so long trying to be enough. I moved into a smaller apartment, a cozy place that felt entirely my own. It wasn't the dream home Sarah had always aspired to, but it was perfect for me. I decorated it simply, with things that brought me joy, not things that impressed others. For the first time, my living space truly felt like a sanctuary. My relationships with friends and family deepened significantly. I spent more time with my brother Mark, who had been my rock through it all. We had honest conversations about life, about what we wanted. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from. We laughed, we shared stories. We just enjoyed each other's company without any underlying tension or judgment. It taught me the true meaning of companionship and unconditional acceptance. I also rediscovered my passion for my work, without the pressure of constantly striving for Sarah's definition of success. I found that I actually enjoyed what I did. I focused on projects that interested me, on contributing meaningfully, rather than just chasing promotions. Ironically, with less pressure, I found myself performing better, and opportunities started to arise organically. My boss even mentioned me for a new leadership program, not because I was pushing for it, but because I was genuinely engaged and effective. It was a pleasant surprise. I learned to say no. No to extra work that would burn me out. No to social engagements that didn't genuinely appeal to me. No to anyone who tried to diminish my worth. This was a powerful lesson. My time, my energy, my peace were valuable, and I was in control of them. Dating was a distant thought for a long time. I needed to heal, to find myself again. But eventually, after about a year, I felt ready. It was strange, navigating the dating world again after so long. But this time, I approached it differently. I was clearer about what I wanted, and more importantly, what I didn't want. I sought genuine connection, kindness, and mutual respect. Not someone to impress or to validate me. I was looking for a partner, not a project manager. One of the most profound lessons I learned was the difference between true ambition and toxic ambition. Sarah's ambition was about external achievement, about status and power. My renewed sense of purpose was about internal fulfillment, about growth, about being a good person, and living a meaningful life. And I realized that my previous definition of failure was simply not aligning with her definition of success. But her definition wasn't the only one. And it certainly wasn't the right one for me. Sometimes, I'd see Sarah's name pop up in news articles about her company's achievements, or hear about her from mutual acquaintances. She was still climbing the corporate ladder, still achieving her version of success, and I felt nothing. No envy, no bitterness, no desire to be back in that world. I wished her well from a distance. Our paths had diverged, and I was content with the one I was on. My 10th anniversary, the one that ended with divorce papers for dessert, was a scar, yes, but also a crucial turning point. It was the moment I stopped being a failure in someone else's eyes and started becoming a survivor in my own. It was the end of a painful chapter, but more importantly, it was the beginning of a life that was truly mine. A life filled with quiet joy, genuine connection, and the unwavering belief that I, Alex, was enough. I was whole, and I was finally, truly free.